Zaylee Morgan, 28, stood frozen in her parents' kitchen, staring at the remains of her graduation cake splattered across the polished hardwood floor. Her sister's son, Tyler, smirked at her from across the room, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Why don't you eat it off the ground? Isn't that where dogs belong?" What should have been the proudest day of her life had shattered in an instant, exposing a family rift deeper than she ever imagined. Before I dive into how my entire family dynamic imploded that day, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever experienced family betrayal, and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this wild family revenge drama that changed everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty. The journey to my graduation day had been anything but easy. Growing up in small-town Massachusetts, I'd always been the family oddball, more interested in books and science than the family construction business that had sustained 3 generations of Morgans. My older sister Valerie had followed the expected path, marrying her high school sweetheart Dean at 19 and having Tyler a year later. Now, at 14, Tyler was the apple of my parents' eye. The grandson who would eventually take over Morgan Construction. I'd taken a different route. After high school, I moved to Boston, working 3 jobs while attending community college. It took me 6 years of night classes, weekend study sessions, and countless sacrifices to finally earn my bachelor's degree in environmental engineering. At 28, I was a full decade behind my peers, but I'd made it. The invitation to my graduation ceremony had sparked unexpected tension. "You're really going to make Mom and Dad drive all the way to Boston for some piece of paper?" Valerie had scoffed during our weekly family video call. "Dad's back has been acting up, you know." "It's not just a piece of paper," I'd replied, trying to keep my voice level. "It's the culmination of years of work. I'd really like everyone there." My parents had exchanged uncomfortable glances before my father cleared his throat. "Of course we'll be there, Zaylee. Wouldn't miss it for the world." But I could see the reluctance in their expressions. Over the years, my family had attended precisely 0 of my academic achievements. Not my community college graduation. Not when I made Dean's List 3 semesters running, and certainly not when I'd presented at a regional environmental conference last year. My accomplishments existed in a parallel universe to the Morgan family reality. Still, this was different. A bachelor's degree from Northeastern University wasn't something they could dismiss as my Boston phase, as my mother liked to call my entire adult life. I'd sent formal invitations 6 months in advance, booked a restaurant for the celebration dinner, and even arranged for them to stay in a comfortable hotel near campus. The week before graduation, I'd called to confirm the plans. "Actually, sweetie," my mother had said, her voice taking on the sickly sweet tone that always preceded disappointment, "we thought it might be nice to have the celebration at home instead. Everyone's so busy these days, and Tyler has his baseball tournament that weekend. But the ceremony is on Saturday. I've already made all the arrangements." "Yes, but driving back on Sunday would be so rushed, and Tyler can't miss his game on Sunday morning. He's the starting pitcher, you know. Why don't you just come home after your ceremony? I'll make your favorite dinner, and we can celebrate properly as a family." By properly, I knew she meant briefly before moving on to more important family matters. But I'd acquiesced, as I always did. Family peace was worth more than my wounded pride. The morning of graduation, my roommate Tasha had sensed my melancholy as I prepared for the ceremony. "Your family's still giving you grief about tonight?" she asked, helping me adjust my cap. "They're not giving me grief," I defended automatically. "They're just set in their ways." Small-town mentality. "They don't really understand why this matters so much." Tasha gave me a look that spoke volumes. "Zay, you've been working toward this for years. They should be throwing you a parade, not making you drive 3 hours after your graduation to eat pot roast in your childhood kitchen." "They're making a cake," I offered weakly. Oh, well, a cake. Stop the presses. Tasha rolled her eyes. Look, I know they're your family, but sometimes I think you let them treat you like a second-class citizen. That's not fair, I protested, but without conviction. The truth was, I'd often felt like the family afterthought. Valerie had always been the golden child following the prescribed Morgan path, without question. Her son Tyler had inherited not just the family business prospects, but also a concerning sense of entitlement that no one but me seemed to notice. The graduation ceremony itself was a blur of emotion. Without family in the audience, I'd felt simultaneously liberated and utterly alone. Tasha and a few classmates had cheered loudly when my name was called, but I couldn't help scanning the crowd for familiar faces that I knew wouldn't be there. Afterward, I declined Tasha's invitation to join the post-graduation celebrations, loading my car for the 3-hour drive home instead. They're making an effort, I told myself repeatedly during the journey. They're trying in their own way. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, evening was settling over our small town. The familiar white colonial with its wraparound porch and meticulously maintained garden looked exactly as it always had, unchanging, while my entire life had transformed. I took a moment to gather my composure before heading inside. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, and I was determined not to let my complicated family dynamics ruin it. Little did I know that the true test of our family bonds was about to begin, setting in motion events that would irreversibly change everything I thought I knew about loyalty, betrayal, and ultimately justice. The moment I stepped through the front door, I was enveloped in the familiar scent of my mother's cooking. For a brief moment, nostalgia washed over me. Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, the soundtrack of my childhood. Then reality intruded as I heard Valerie's voice from the kitchen complaining loudly about someone from her PTA meeting. Zaylee's here. My father emerged from his study, arms outstretched for a hug. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. How's our college graduate, university graduate dad? I corrected, gently returning his embrace. Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering. Right. He nodded though. I could tell the distinction meant little to him. Your mother's been cooking all day. Everyone's excited to celebrate. A generous interpretation of everyone, I thought, but kept the observation to myself. In the kitchen, my mother fussed over a pot roast while Valerie sat at the island counter scrolling through her phone. My brother-in-law Dean was watching a basketball game in the adjacent family room, and there was no sign of Tyler. There she is. My mother wiped her hands on her apron before embracing me. Our little scholar, how was the ceremony? It was good, I said, accepting her hug. Long but good. Valerie glanced up from her phone. At 34, she still maintained the cheerleader looks that had defined her high school popularity. Did they do that thing where they move the tassel from one side to the other? I always thought that was so cheesy. Yes, Valerie, that's generally how graduation ceremonies work, I replied, trying to keep the edge from my voice. Where's Tyler? Upstairs playing video games, Dean called from the family room, not bothering to turn away from the TV. He's in a tournament or something. Said not to disturb him. I nodded, unsurprised. Tyler had grown increasingly distant over the past few years, his attitude toward me shifting from childhood adoration to teenage disdain. Our once close relationship, I'd been his favorite aunt, the one who built volcanoes in the backyard and taught him to identify constellations, had disintegrated after I moved to Boston. I brought something for him, I said, retrieving a package from my bag. The new gaming headset he wanted. My mother clucked her tongue. You shouldn't have, Zaylee. You know how tight money must be for you right now. The comment stung, especially considering I'd just landed a job with an environmental consulting firm that paid more than my parents and sister combined. But they didn't know that yet. I'd been saving that news for dinner. It's fine, Mom. I wanted to get him something special. Well, that's very thoughtful, she replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. Dinner will be ready in about 30 minutes. Why don't you go get cleaned up? You must be tired after all that driving. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, which remained frozen in time. Debate team trophies, science fair ribbons, and the star chart I'd meticulously created at 13, still adorning the walls. Sitting on the twin bed with its faded constellation comforter, I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. Not for their validation, but to mark a personal milestone. Their perception of my accomplishments didn't diminish their value. When I came downstairs, the dining room table was set with the good china, a small acknowledgement that today was indeed special. My mother had arranged a modest display on the sideboard, a congratulations graduate banner from the dollar store, a small pile of wrapped gifts, and a cake box from the local bakery. "Is that from Hartley's?" I asked, genuinely touched. Hartley's bakery made the best cakes in town, but they were expensive. A luxury reserved for significant occasions. "Only the best for our graduate," my father said with a wink. For the first time since arriving, I felt a glimmer of hope that they truly were proud of me. Maybe Tasha had been wrong. Maybe they did value my achievements in their own way. As everyone gathered around the table, Tyler finally emerged from upstairs, his expression making it clear that his presence was under duress. "Nice of you to join us," Valerie said, without any real reproach. "Say hello to your Aunt Zaylee. She graduated from college today." "University," I corrected automatically. Tyler gave me a perfunctory nod. "Cool. I have something for you," I said, sliding the wrapped package across the table. "A graduation gift from me to you." His eyebrows rose slightly, the closest thing to enthusiasm I was likely to get. He tore open the wrapping, and for a moment his carefully cultivated teenage indifference slipped. "Whoa, the Sonic Cloud 5000. These aren't even available yet." He examined the gaming headset with genuine excitement. "I have a friend who works for the company," I explained, warmed by his reaction. "I thought you might like it." "This is sick. Thanks, Aunt Zay." For a moment, he was the little boy who used to follow me around the yard, collecting interesting rocks and insects. The dinner that followed was surprisingly pleasant. My father asked thoughtful questions about my degree, and even Valerie seemed interested when I explained my capstone project on sustainable urban water systems. When I announced my new job, their reactions seemed genuinely positive. "Environmental consulting, huh?" My father nodded appreciatively. "Good stable field these days, green energy and all that. The salary's excellent too," I added, unable to resist. Starting at $85,000 with full benefits and stock options. There was a moment of stunned silence. My mother recovered first. "Well, that's wonderful, dear. We always knew you were smart." As the meal progressed, I began to relax. Maybe we were turning a corner. Maybe my academic and professional success had finally earned me a place at the family table that wasn't an afterthought. Then came dessert, and with it, the moment that would change everything. "Time for cake," my mother announced, rising from her seat. She retrieved the bakery box from the sideboard, placing it carefully on the cleared dining table. "Zaylee, this is your special day. Why don't you do the honors?" I moved to open the box, feeling a surge of childlike anticipation. Inside was a round cake with pale blue frosting and the words "Congratulations, graduate" written in elegant script. Delicate fondant decorations, a miniature graduation cap diploma, and tiny books adorned the edges. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely moved. "Thank you." "Wait until you taste it," my father said with a grin. "It's that lemon raspberry you always loved." The gesture felt meaningful. They had remembered my favorite flavor, commissioned a professional cake. These were the small acknowledgments I'd been craving for years. "Let me get the plates," my mother said, heading back to the kitchen. "Valerie, could you help me with the coffee?" As my mother and sister left the room, I remained standing by the cake, admiring the detailed decoration. My father excused himself to use the bathroom, and Dean was still transfixed by the game on his phone, leaving just Tyler and me at the table. "That's a pretty nice cake," I said, trying to reconnect with the brief moment of warmth we'd shared earlier. "Want to help me serve it?" Tyler glanced up from his phone, his expression unreadable. "Why do you even bother coming back here?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Everyone knows you think you're better than us now." His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "With your fancy degree and big city job?" "That's not true, Tyler. This is my home. You're my family," he scoffed. "Yeah, right. You left the first chance you got. I left for school, Tyler. That's normal. But I always come back. Whatever." He looked past me, his eyes narrowing. "You know, they only did all this because they felt obligated, right? Nobody actually cares about your stupid degree." The words hit like a physical blow. "Why would you say something like that?" He shrugged, but there was nothing casual about it. "Mom says you've always needed to be the center of attention. That's why you couldn't just work in the family business like everyone else." "Did she say that to you?" "She says a lot of things when you're not here." His smirk returned. "About how you think you're too good for us now. How you look down on everyone who didn't go to college." "University," I corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it as his expression darkened. "See, that's exactly what she means. You're always correcting everyone, showing off how smart you are." I took a deep breath, trying to diffuse the situation. "Tyler, I don't know why you're upset with me, but today is important to me. Can we just enjoy the celebration?" Something flickered in his eyes. A calculation, a decision being made. Then, with deliberate slowness, he stood up and walked to my side of the table. "You want to know what I think about your celebration?" He placed his hand on the edge of the cake box. "Tyler," I began, but it was too late. In one swift motion, he shoved the cake off the table. It seemed to fall in slow motion, turning once in the air before landing with a sickening splat on the hardwood floor. Blue frosting splattered across the polished surface, raspberry filling, oozing out like a wound. I stared at the destroyed cake in shock, unable to process what had just happened. When I looked up, Tyler was watching me with a cold satisfaction that sent chills down my spine. "Why don't you eat it off the ground?" he said, his voice low and cruel. "Isn't that where dogs belong?" The kitchen door swung open as my mother returned with a stack of dessert plates. She froze at the scene before her, the cake destroyed on the floor, Tyler standing over it, me rooted in place with tears welling in my eyes. "What on earth happened?" she gasped. Before I could speak, Tyler's face transformed. His eyes widened in feigned innocence, his voice taking on a tremble. "It was an accident. I was just trying to help move the cake, and Aunt Zaylee bumped into me. I didn't. I started, but my mother's expression had already shifted from shock to disappointment as she looked at me. "Oh, Zaylee," she sighed. "You've always been so clumsy." The injustice of it struck me speechless. My father returned, surveying the scene with confusion. "What happened to the cake?" "Apparently there was an accident," my mother said, already moving to get paper towels. "Tyler was trying to help, and he's lying," I interrupted, finding my voice at last. "He deliberately pushed the cake onto the floor." My mother's back stiffened. "Now, Zaylee, there's no need to blame others for an accident. It wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose and told me to eat it off the ground." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's face had assumed an expression of wounded innocence that was so convincing it made me doubt my own reality for a moment. "Why would you say something like that?" Valerie demanded, entering with the coffee pot. "Tyler would never do such a thing." "He did," I insisted. "He said your family talks about me behind my back. He said nobody actually cares about my graduation." Valerie's face flushed with anger. "So now you're calling my son a liar. I'm telling you what happened." My brother-in-law finally looked up from his phone. "Come on, Zay. The kid was just trying to help. Why would he deliberately ruin your cake? I looked from face to face, seeing nothing but disbelief and growing hostility. Even my father, who had always been my quiet ally, seemed uncertain. Tyler, my mother said gently, tell us what really happened. Tyler's performance was masterful. His eyes welled with tears, his voice cracking just enough. I was just trying to move the cake closer to Aunt Zaylee. She bumped my arm and it fell. I said I was sorry, but then she got angry and said she was going to tell everyone I did it on purpose. That's not what happened, I protested, but I could see they had already made their decision about who to believe. Zaylee, my mother said in the same tone she'd used when I was a difficult child, I think you're overtired from all the excitement today. Why don't you go upstairs and rest while we clean this up? The suggestion, dismissing me to my room like a misbehaving child on the day of my college graduation, was the final straw. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Not until you all acknowledge what actually happened here. Valerie stepped between me and Tyler, her protective instinct on full display. What's wrong with you? He's a child. He's 14, not 4, I countered. Old enough to know exactly what he was doing. That's enough, my father said sharply. I don't know what happened, and at this point, I don't care. The cake is ruined, and fighting about it won't change that. I looked down at the destroyed celebration of my achievement, blue frosting spreading across the floor like a stain. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not just my heart, but a lifetime of making excuses for the way my family treated me. You're right, Dad, I said quietly. Fighting won't change anything. Nothing ever does. I walked to the coat rack, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. Zaylee, don't be dramatic, my mother called after me. Where are you going? I paused at the threshold, turning back to face the tableau of my family. My mother with paper towels in hand. My father's weary expression, Valerie standing protectively beside Tyler, who couldn't quite hide, the satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I'm going home, I said simply. My real home. As I walked to my car, I could hear them calling after me, their voices, a mixture of exasperation and performative concern. But I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself over the family that had never fully chosen me. What I didn't realize then was that this moment, this cake smashed on the floor of my childhood home, was just the beginning. The true reckoning was yet to come. The 3-hour drive back to Boston passed in a blur of tears and fury. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my parents and sister, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Not yet. Not while the image of that destroyed cake and the smirk on Tyler's face was still so vivid in my mind. It was nearly midnight when I reached my apartment. Tasha was still up watching a movie in our small living room. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. "Oh, Zay," she said, opening her arms. I collapsed into her embrace, finally letting go of the composure I'd maintained during the drive. What happened? Through broken sobs, I recounted the evening's events. The initially pleasant dinner, the beautiful cake, Tyler's sudden cruelty, and my family's immediate choice to believe him over me. He's just a child, I mimicked bitterly, as if being 14 excuses that kind of behavior. Tasha's expression darkened. It doesn't. And the fact that they all jumped to his defense without even considering your side. She shook her head. I hate to say I told you so. No, you were right, I acknowledged, wiping my tears. I've been making excuses for them for years, pretending that their dismissal of everything I do doesn't hurt. So what now? She asked gently. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a strange calm settling over me. I don't know. For the first time, I'm not rushing to smooth things over. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Please call us. We're worried about you driving so late. They're concerned about your safety, Tasha observed, reading the message over my shoulder. That's something at least. Is it? Or is it just another form of control? I set the phone aside. I need some time to think. That night, sleep eluded me. I replayed the scene in my parents' dining room over and over, each time catching new details. The brief flash of triumph in Tyler's eyes, the way Valerie positioned herself between us, my father's exhausted resignation. Had there been signs all along that I'd chosen to ignore, warning flags that my desire for family acceptance had blinded me to? By morning, I had dozens of missed calls and messages. My mother's texts had evolved from concern to guilt-tripping. "I can't believe you would ruin your graduation dinner like this. Your father is very upset." Valerie was more direct. "You owe Tyler an apology. He's been crying all night because his aunt accused him of being a liar." Only my father's message gave me pause. "I don't know what happened with the cake, but I do know you've worked too hard to let this overshadow your accomplishment. Call me when you're ready." I silenced my phone and went about preparing for my first day at my new job. Environmental Solutions Incorporated. It was a mid-sized consulting firm specializing in sustainable urban development, exactly the field I'd been passionate about throughout my studies. Despite the emotional turmoil of the previous night, I found myself excited as I dressed in my carefully chosen first-day outfit. "You're going to crush it," Tasha assured me as I headed out the door. "And when you get home, we're having a proper graduation celebration. I've ordered a cake from that fancy bakery you love, twice the size of the one your nephew destroyed." The first week at my new job was a welcome distraction from the family drama. My colleagues were smart and engaging, the projects challenging in all the right ways. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued the very qualities my family had always dismissed: my analytical mind, my attention to detail, my passion for environmental science. By Friday, I'd finally worked up the courage to listen to the voicemails that had accumulated on my phone. Most were variations on the same themes: my mother's passive-aggressive concern, Valerie's defensive anger. But there was one from Tyler that made me pause. "Aunt Zaylee." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I'm sorry about what happened with your cake. I don't know why I did that. Please don't be mad at everyone else. It was my fault." I played the message twice, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this a genuine apology, or had he been coached by my parents to say what they thought I wanted to hear? Before I could decide, another call came in, from my father. "Dad," I answered, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not ready to talk about what happened." "That's not why I'm calling," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something you should know. Your mother had a fall this morning." "She's okay," he added quickly, "just a sprained ankle." But when the doctor was checking her over, they found something else: an irregularity with her heart. My own heart seemed to stop. "What kind of irregularity?" "They're not sure yet. She's having tests done on Monday." He paused. "She's been asking for you." The familiar weight of family obligations settled on my shoulders. "I'll come tomorrow," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Actually, I need to check my schedule. I'll let you know." There was a long silence. "Zaylee," he finally said, "I know you're hurt. And maybe you have reason to be. But she's still your mother." After we hung up, I sat motionless, torn between genuine concern for my mother and the nagging suspicion that this was another manipulation, intentional or not, to pull me back into the family orbit before I'd had time to process my feelings. I called Tasha. "My mom's sick." "Maybe." "They found some heart issue during an exam for a sprained ankle." "Are you going home?" she asked simply. "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should. The other part is wondering if this is convenient timing." I sighed. "Is that terrible of me to question something like this?" "It's self-protective," Tasha replied, "and given what just happened, totally understandable." I spent the weekend in a state of indecision, drafting and discarding texts to my father. By Sunday night, guilt won out, and I arranged to take Monday afternoon off to visit. The familiar drive to my hometown felt different this time, heavy with a new awareness that had been awakened in me. At the hospital, I found my mother in an outpatient exam room looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. My father sat beside her holding her hand. They both looked up as I entered, relief evident on their faces. "You came," my mother said softly. "Of course I came," I replied, because what else could I say? The doctor arrived shortly after, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a direct manner. "Mrs. Morgan, we've reviewed your tests, and I'm pleased to say we didn't find any significant cardiac issues." My mother's grip on my father's hand tightened visibly. "But the irregularity you mentioned, a minor arrhythmia likely due to stress. Nothing that requires medical intervention at this time, though. I do recommend following up with your regular physician." As the doctor continued with her instructions, I noticed my mother's gaze flicker toward me, then away. A suspicion began to form in my mind, one I immediately felt guilty for harboring. After the doctor left, my father went to bring the car around, leaving my mother and me alone for the first time. "I'm glad you're okay," I said sincerely. She nodded, fidgeting with the hospital bracelet on her wrist. "I was so worried when you drove off like that. You were upset. It wasn't safe. I'm a grown woman, Mom. I've been driving that route for years." Still, a mother worries. She looked at me directly now. "Zaylee, about what happened with the cake. Perhaps we all overreacted." I waited, wondering if this was as close to an apology as I was going to get. "Tyler feels terrible," she continued. "He left you that message, didn't he?" I told him it was the right thing to do. "Yes, he did," I acknowledged. "But I'm not sure he meant it." My mother's face tightened. "Why would you say that?" "He apologized." "Did he tell you what he actually said to me?" Before he pushed the cake off the table, she looked away. "He's a teenager, Zaylee. They say thoughtless things sometimes." "He told me to eat the cake off the floor, Mom. He called me a dog." For a moment, I thought I saw genuine shock in her expression. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual defensive posture. "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way." "How exactly does one mean something like that?" She sighed heavily. "What do you want from us, Zaylee?" Tyler apologized. "I've been in the hospital." Isn't that enough drama for 1 week? And there it was, the subtle implication that my feelings, my hurt, my graduation celebration were all just drama that inconvenienced the family. Before I could respond, my father returned. "Car's out front," he announced, helping my mother gather her things. "Zaylee, are you coming back to the house?" I hesitated suddenly, certain that if I returned to that house now, we would all fall back into our familiar patterns. Them dismissing my concerns, me swallowing my hurt for the sake of peace. "Actually, I should get back to Boston," I said, checking my watch. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line of disappointment, but she said nothing. My father nodded, resigned. "I understand," he said, though I wasn't sure he did. "Drive safely." As I watched them walk slowly toward the exit, my mother leaning slightly on my father's arm, I felt a complex mix of emotions: love, concern, frustration, and a growing resolve that something needed to change. What I didn't realize then was that the wheels of change were already in motion, set spinning by forces beyond my control. The true reckoning was coming, and it would shake our family to its foundations. I think we've all experienced those moments when family tensions reach a breaking point. Has anyone else dealt with family members who refuse to believe your side of the story? Drop a comment below about how you handled it. And if you're finding this family drama relatable, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. I promise the most shocking part of this story is yet to come. 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo of minimal contact with my family. I threw myself into my new job, grateful for the demanding projects that kept my mind occupied. When my mother called, our conversations were stilted and brief, carefully avoiding any mention of the graduation dinner incident. Valerie had stopped reaching out entirely, and Tyler's single apologetic voicemail remained unanswered. Only my father maintained some semblance of normal communication, texting occasionally to check in or share a photo of something that reminded him of me. A heron at the local pond where we used to go fishing, a science article he thought might interest me. Small gestures that felt like a tenuous bridge across a widening chasm. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang with a call from an unknown local number. "Is this Zaylee Morgan?" The woman's voice was unfamiliar. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Patricia Hartley. From Hartley's Bakery." The name registered immediately. The bakery that had made my graduation cake. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from your mother when she placed the order." "Not at all," I replied, puzzled. "What can I help you with?" There was a pause, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "I heard about what happened with your graduation cake. Your nephew wasn't it?" The memory of the cake splattered across the floor flashed through my mind. "Yes, but how did you?" "Small town," she said simply. "Word gets around. Especially when Valerie Morgan is telling everyone who'll listen that her sister had a meltdown over an accident with a cake." I closed my eyes, fighting a fresh wave of anger. Of course, Valerie would be spreading her version of events. "Mrs. Hartley, I appreciate the call, but that's not why I'm calling," she interrupted. "I'm calling because something's been bothering me and I thought you should know." My curiosity piqued. "What is it?" 3 days before your graduation, your sister came into my shop. She was with her son, good-looking boy, but with an attitude, if you don't mind me saying. She ordered a cake for a graduation." "Yes, my graduation cake. The lemon raspberry one." "No, that's just it," Patricia said. The cake she ordered wasn't for a college graduation. It was for an 8th grade graduation. For her son. The information didn't immediately register. "I don't understand." "Neither did I at first," Patricia continued. "But then she specifically asked for it to say, 'Congratulations, Tyler,' and had me design it with baseball decorations. Little fondant bats and balls. She paid for it in full, said she'd pick it up that Friday." I leaned against the kitchen counter trying to process this information. But my cake said, "Congratulations, graduate." It had books and a diploma on it. "Exactly," Patricia said. That Friday morning, Valerie called in a panic. Said there had been a misunderstanding and she needed to change the decoration and inscription on the cake. Insisted it needed to be ready by that afternoon. I had to scramble to remake the decorations. A cold realization began to settle over me. "Are you saying the cake at your graduation dinner was never meant for you, Zaylee?" It was Tyler's cake redecorated at the last minute. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The cake, the one symbol of my family's acknowledgement of my achievement, had been an afterthought, a hastily repurposed celebration for someone else. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia sighed. "I've known your family a long time. Served cake at your parents' wedding, your sister's baby shower, all those birthdays. I've watched you grow up, always a little separate from the rest of them. Always trying a little harder for the same recognition." She paused. "When I heard how they were spinning, what happened? Well, it didn't sit right with me. Thought you deserved to know the truth." After thanking her and hanging up, I sat motionless in my kitchen, the implications of her revelation washing over me in waves. The cake hadn't merely been an obligatory gesture. It had been a literal last-minute substitution, a symbol repurposed from someone else's celebration. In that moment, with painful clarity, I saw the pattern that had defined my relationship with my family for as long as I could remember. I wasn't just the afterthought. I was the inconvenience, the square peg they reluctantly made space for when absolutely necessary. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them with what I'd learned. Not yet. Instead, I would do something I'd never truly done before. I would put myself first without guilt or explanation. Starting with the family group chat, which I silenced indefinitely. The next few months passed in a liberating blur of new experiences and connections. I excelled at work, taking on challenging projects that showcased my expertise. I expanded my social circle, accepting invitations I might have declined in the past to accommodate family obligations. I even began dating someone, Michael, an urban planner I met through a work project whose quiet confidence and genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings was a revelation after years of being dismissed. My limited contact with my family during this time was cordial but distant. I deflected invitations to weekend visits with vague references to work commitments. I sent birthday cards and appropriate holiday greetings, but declined to make the traditional Thanksgiving trip home, opting instead for a Friendsgiving with Tasha and our circle in Boston. It was my father who finally broke the stalemate, calling one evening in early December. "I'm in the city," he said without preamble. "Thought maybe we could have dinner." We met at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment, neutral territory. He looked older than he had at the hospital, the lines in his face deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. "You look good, Zaylee," he said after we'd ordered. "Happy." "I am," I replied, surprising myself with how true it was. Work is challenging in all the right ways. I'm making friends, building a life. He nodded, a complicated expression crossing his face. "Your mother misses you." "We all do." "Do you?" I asked simply. His eyes met mine, then dropped to his water glass. "It's not the same without you checking in. Even Valerie's noticed." "I find that hard to believe," he sighed heavily. "Things with your sister have always been complicated." That's one word for it. We ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "I know things haven't been fair to you, Zaylee. The way your achievements get overlooked while Tyler's every little accomplishment is celebrated like he's cured cancer." The unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. "You notice that I'm your father." "Of course I noticed." He set down his fork. "I just didn't do anything about it. And that's on me." The simple admission unleashed a flood of emotions I'd been carefully controlling for months. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why has it always been this way?" My father stared into his wine glass as if seeking answers in its depths. "Your mother and I. We come from a world where you follow a certain path. You grow up, maybe go to community college if you're ambitious, but mostly you learn a trade, start a family, stay close to home. And I didn't do any of that." "No, you didn't." A small, sad smile crossed his face. "You had bigger dreams. And I think that scared your mother, made her feel like you were rejecting everything she valued." "I wasn't rejecting anything," I protested. "I was just following my own path." "I know that." But she saw it differently. "And Valerie?" "Well, Valerie followed the expected path to the letter. When you started achieving all these things, she never even attempted. She resented me," I finished. He nodded reluctantly. "I think she felt threatened, like your success somehow diminished her choices." I absorbed this in silence, turning over the years of subtle slights and dismissals in a new light. "And Tyler," I finally asked, "what's his excuse?" My father's expression darkened. "Tyler is. He's becoming someone I don't entirely recognize. There's an entitlement there that worries me. Valerie and Dean treat him like he can do no wrong, and he's started to believe it." "Like with the cake," I said quietly. My father met my eyes directly for the first time that evening. "I don't know exactly what happened that night, Zaylee, but I know my grandson. And I know you. If you say he deliberately pushed that cake onto the floor, I believe you." The validation I'd been seeking for months should have felt vindicating. Instead, it only underscored the dysfunction at the heart of our family. Did you know I asked the question that had been haunting me since Patricia Hartley's call? About the cake originally being for Tyler's surprise, flashed across his face, followed by confusion, then dawning comprehension. No, he said, and I believed him. But it explains why your mother was so insistent on having the celebration at home rather than in Boston. Tyler's middle school graduation ceremony was that same weekend. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The insistence that I drive home immediately after my ceremony hadn't just been about convenience. It had been to ensure I didn't overshadow Tyler's 8th grade graduation. So what now, I asked, suddenly tired. We just keep going as we have been, pretending everything's fine while Valerie tells everyone I had a meltdown over an accident. My father was quiet for a long moment. I can't tell you what to do, Zaylee. But I can tell you that families are complicated, imperfect things. Sometimes loving them means accepting that imperfection. And sometimes, I countered, loving yourself means acknowledging when a relationship is harmful. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. He reached across the table briefly, covering my hand with his weathered one. Whatever you decide, just know that I'm proud of you. Not just for your degree or your job, but for the person you've become. Independent, principled, strong. As we parted ways that night, I felt a shift in our relationship. A new honesty that, while painful, felt like the beginning of something healthier. What I didn't realize was that this conversation was setting the stage for a confrontation that would finally bring the family's long-simmering tensions to a boil. The catalyst came as family dramas often do with the approach of the holidays. Christmas had always been a non-negotiable, Morgan family gathering with attendance expected regardless of distance or circumstance. This year, however, I had made other plans. You're not coming home for Christmas. My mother's voice over the phone contained equal parts disbelief and disapproval. But we always have Christmas together. I know, Mom, but I've already committed to a service trip with my company. We're helping rebuild a community center in New Orleans that was damaged in the last hurricane. This was true. Environmental Solutions had organized a volunteer expedition, combining environmental consultancy with hands-on community service, and I had eagerly signed up. What I didn't mention was that the trip had been optional and that my decision to participate had been influenced by my reluctance to face another strained family gathering. Surely they can find someone else to go, my mother pressed. Christmas is for family. I'm sorry, but I've already made the commitment. I kept my tone gentle but firm. I'll try to call on Christmas Day. There was a long silence. Your nephew will be very disappointed. He was looking forward to seeing you. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. Tyler had shown no interest in seeing me since the cake incident, and we both knew it. I'm sure he'll manage, I replied dryly. He'll have plenty of presents to distract him. Another silence, this one charged with tension. I don't understand what's happened to you, Zaylee. You used to care about family traditions. I still care, Mom. I just care about other things too. After we hung up, I felt the familiar guilt creeping in but pushed it aside. The boundaries I'd established over the past months had been healthy and necessary. I wouldn't backslide now. What I hadn't anticipated was that my absence would create a family crisis. 3 days before Christmas, my father called. Your mother's beside herself, he said without preamble. She's convinced you're cutting ties with the family. I'm not cutting ties, I sighed. I'm just spending one Christmas doing service work instead of watching Tyler open 30 presents while everyone ignores me. That's not fair, Zaylee. Isn't it? When was the last time anyone asked about my job or my life in Boston? When was the last time the conversation at a family gathering wasn't dominated by Tyler's baseball stats or Valerie's PTA drama? My father was quiet for a moment. I hear you. But is avoiding us altogether? The answer, I'm not avoiding you, Dad. I'm making a choice that's important to me professionally and personally. If Mom can't respect that, it's her issue, not mine." After we hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground without apology or compromise. It felt right. Christmas came and went. I spent it helping install energy-efficient heating systems in a community center surrounded by colleagues who valued my expertise, and new friends who appreciated my company for what it was, not what they expected it to be. I called my parents as promised, endured a brief strained conversation, and returned to the work that fulfilled me. I didn't expect the next call, which came 3 days after Christmas. It was Valerie. "We need to talk," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "About, not over the phone. I'm in Boston for a conference. Can we meet?" Curiosity overcame my reservations. "There's a coffee shop near my apartment. Jefferson's on Cambridge Street. I can meet you there at 6. When I arrived at the cafe that evening, Valerie was already there, nursing a large coffee and looking uncharacteristically nervous. Without her usual audience of admiring family members, she seemed smaller, somehow less certain. "Thanks for coming," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "What's this about Valerie?" She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Mom's really upset about Christmas. I gathered that from Dad's call." "Is that why you're here? To guilt me into apologizing for having my own life?" "No," she said, surprising me. "I'm here because I think things have gotten out of hand. With our family?" I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Tyler's behavior has been getting worse," she continued, avoiding my gaze. "Not just with you, with everyone. His teachers have called multiple times about his attitude. He was suspended last month for bullying another student. This was unexpected." "I'm sorry to hear that. But what does it have to do with me?" Valerie took a deep breath. "After you didn't come for Christmas, Mom and Dad had a huge fight. I've never seen Dad so angry. He said we've all enabled Tyler's worst qualities and that the way we treated you after the graduation dinner was the perfect example." I sat back, processing this information. "And you disagree?" "I didn't want to believe it," she admitted. "That my son could be deliberately cruel like that. But then..." She reached into her bag and pulled out a phone. "I found this on Tyler's dresser when I was cleaning his room. It's his old phone. He got a new one for Christmas." She unlocked the screen and handed it to me. It was open to a group chat with several other teenagers. I scrolled up to a conversation from the day of my graduation dinner. "Tyler, my aunt's graduation dinner tonight. So lame. Friend, skip it. Tyler can't. But gonna make it interesting. Friend Tyler, Mom says the cake is actually mine from graduation, but they're pretending it's for her. Gonna show her where she really ranks. LOL. Friend Savage Tyler bet she cries." My stomach churned as I read the messages. The deliberate cruelty, now irrefutable. I handed the phone back to Valerie, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I never wanted to believe he could do something like that on purpose," she whispered. "I convinced myself you were overreacting, that it was an accident he was too embarrassed to admit. But now you know," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. She nodded miserably. "Dad was right. We've created this entitled monster who thinks it's funny to hurt people, and I don't know how to fix it." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Why are you telling me this now, Valerie? What do you want from me?" She hesitated. "I want to try to make things right. Between us. Between you and the family. By showing me that my nephew is even more deliberately cruel than I thought. That my sister and mother chose to believe him over me, despite having every reason to know better." Valerie flinched. "I know it sounds bad when you put it that way. It sounds bad because it is bad, Valerie. Do you have any idea how it felt to have my graduation, something I worked years for, treated as an inconvenience. To have the one symbol of celebration literally destroyed in front of me and then be told I was imagining things when I thinks comments about, called it out. "I'm sorry," she said, the words clearly unfamiliar on her tongue. "I really am. I didn't want to see it. It was easier to think you were being dramatic." I studied my sister's face. The sister who had always been the golden child, whose path had always been smooth and supported. For the first time, I saw fear there. Fear that her perfect family narrative was crumbling, that her son was becoming someone she couldn't control or predict. "What do you want me to say, Valerie? That I forgive you? That we can just go back to the way things were, can't we?" she asked, a note of desperate hope in her voice. For Mom and Dad's sake, if nothing else, I shook my head slowly. "No, we can't. Because the way things were was toxic for me. I was always the afterthought, the inconvenience, the one whose achievements were minimized while Tyler's every burp was celebrated like a symphony." "That's not true," she protested weakly. "It is true, and you know it. The cake was ordered for him, Valerie. My graduation cake was literally his cake repurposed at the last minute." Her eyes widened in genuine surprise. "How did you know that?" "Small town," I echoed Patricia Hartley's words. "Word gets around." Valerie's shoulders slumped in defeat. "So that's it. You're just done with all of us." I considered the question, carefully aware that my answer would set the course for my family relationships moving forward. "I'm not done with the family," I said, finally. "But I am done with pretending. Done with accepting less than I deserve. Done with being the only one who ever has to compromise." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I'll be part of this family on my terms, not yours. It means Tyler apologizes to me. A real apology, not the coached performance he delivered over voicemail. It means you and Mom acknowledge what actually happened instead of spinning stories about me having a meltdown." Valerie looked both relieved and apprehensive. "And if we do all that, you'll come back for family gatherings, when I can and when I want to. Not because it's expected or demanded. And with the understanding that my life and my achievements matter just as much as anyone else's." It wasn't a perfect resolution. Those only exist in fairy tales. But as Valerie and I parted ways that evening, there was a fragile new understanding between us. One based not on the comfortable lies we'd always told ourselves about our family, but on a harder, more honest truth. What none of us could have predicted was how this confrontation would ultimately lead to the most unexpected twist in our family saga, one that would finally bring true justice to light. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my parents' kitchen, watching as my family gathered for my father's 60th birthday celebration. So much had changed since that fateful graduation dinner, yet the scene before me held echoes of that day. My mother fussing over the food, Valerie arranging plates, Tyler skulking at the edges of the activity. The difference was in the undercurrents. My mother's smiles toward me were tentative but genuine. Valerie's usual performance of perfect family harmony had been replaced by a more subdued, thoughtful presence. And Tyler, now 15 and recently returned from a month-long wilderness therapy program for troubled teens, watched me with a wary respect that had never been there before. The road to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. After my confrontation with Valerie, the family had gone through what could only be described as an earthquake. Long-buried tensions rising to the surface, old patterns being challenged, new boundaries being established and tested. Tyler's apology, when it finally came, had been halting and uncomfortable, but also, I believed, sincere. "I wanted to hurt you," he'd admitted during a family therapy session that had been Valerie's idea, "because it made me feel powerful when everything else in my life felt out of control." It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation, one that had led to difficult conversations about the pressure we'd all put on him to be the family golden child, the impossible expectations that had warped his sense of self and others. My mother had been the last to acknowledge her role in the family dynamics. I just wanted everyone to be happy, she protested when confronted with her pattern of dismissing my achievements. To be together the way families should be. But we weren't happy, Mom, I'd replied gently. We were just pretending to be. Now, as my father prepared to blow out the candles on his birthday cake from a different bakery, some wounds were still too fresh. I felt a complex mix of emotions, not the uncomplicated happiness of fairy tale endings, but something more nuanced and real. Pride in the hard work we'd all done to reach this point, caution about the fragility of our new understanding, hope for a future where we could love each other not despite our differences but because of them. Zaylee, my father called, beckoning me to join the family circle around the cake. We can't do this without you. As I stepped forward to take my place, I caught Tyler's eye across the table. He gave me a small, uncertain smile. Not the smirk of before, but something new and tentative. I returned it with one of my own. This wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely provides those, but it was a new beginning. And sometimes that's the truest form of justice. Reflecting on this journey has taught me so much about family forgiveness and finding my voice. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I hope this family revenge story offers some perspective or courage for your own life challenges. Until next time.